If there's one thing I have picked up on for a while now in the Sonic sphere, as I like to call it, it's that Forces has become the new target for Sonic slam dunking when retrospecting it, but it's not without good reason. As somebody that has played the game, it's aggressively mid. It's a living embodiment of good ideas with bad execution. The story had a great premise on what if Eggman took over the world, and showing how it affects the characters. However, Tails' character is completely assassinated, the characters barely do anything until near the end of the game, and Classic Sonic is there for some reason. The gameplay is easy and automated until the endgame stages spike up the difficulty. The avatar is the same as Sonic without the boost, and you give it a weapon that's essentially a cheap way to disguise the Wisp gimmick. Classic Sonic is the only unique gameplay style, but there is no need to have him here besides trying to tie it to Sonic Mania, and
we've got to have money.
It's just an overall mess that could have been way better than it actually is. However, what came with the game as free DLC was a bonus side campaign known as Episode Shadow. The DLC was created to appeal to Sonic fans who like the older games such as the Adventure series. This was the first time Shadow was playable in a mainline Sonic game in like a long while. I don't know if Rivals counts as a mainline game or not. I don't know. Critics even noted it was harder than the base game as well. So what does this have to do with this video? That's because we are going to talk about this DLC. I think it's relevant since we are getting a remaster of Generations with a huge Shadow campaign. So join me as we answer the question. Is Episode Shadow any good? Let us begin. The DLC, story-wise, serves as a prequel to the game, as stated once you boot it up. It serves as how Shadow learned about the Phantom Ruby. It also answers how Infinite came to be, but we'll get to that later. Oh man, will we get to that part later. However, let's start talking about the DLC itself for realsies. It begins with Rouge giving Shadow intel on a secret base outside the perimeters of Eggman's army. In spite of it, it has a humongous abundance of troops in it. She also explains there are rumors that Eggman is developing a new weapon. So Shadow goes along to meet up with Omega to investigate the base. So stepping into the first level, there is already a problem. It's less about the level itself and more about Shadow himself. He plays the exact same as Sonic. You just boost, homing attack, and stomp your way through the level. If it weren't for the different animations, you'd think he's just a reskin for Sonic. Onto the level, it's alright. You can boost your way, or you can homing attack balloons and enemies to cross gaps. It gets more interesting at the halfway point as Omega's heavily damaged in battle. I do like that he started blasting in the base. That's just perfectly in character for him. Omega is essentially the robot embodiment of a kid playing Call of Duty. On the gameplay side, the level gets trickier as you have to navigate across the spinning spike balls. Once you get past that, the level is over. One more thing I would like to mention is that the level has a pretty neat remix of Westopolis from Shadow the Hedgehog. The DLC has remixed versions of Shadow-related level themes and songs for its levels, and they're all great. Afterwards, Rouge's communicator gets hijacked and Shadow encounters Infinite, gloating about his victory over Omega. He then turns his attention to Shadow, who has been expecting him, and goads him on. Shadow, however, doesn't know him, and Infinite decides to enlighten him on such a subject. I don't know why, but this scenario feels a little, familiar. Oh well, on to the next level, where we go back a couple of months before the DLC. I'm not afraid to call this the worst of the 3 levels in this DLC. For one thing, the water slide gimmick, which I found annoying already in the base game. It wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't what most of the level was composed of. That's not the only problem either. It's also very short, even for Force's standards. When I completed the level, I was like, that's it? Oh well, at least there's a funny bit where Eggman gets progressively angrier as you progress, and we get a nice remix of rhythm and balance from Sonic Adventure 2. However, after this level, we have the moment you guys have probably been waiting for. The moment that explains how Infinite came to be. He gets bodied by Shadow and he tells him he sucks. He then starts tweaking over being called mid and gains the power of the Phantom Ruby in response to this. Words can and can't explain how utterly stupid this is. It makes this actually somewhat interesting character, ironically, worthless, because now we know he became such a threat because Shadow bodied him and called him mean names. Shadow didn't even say he was weak, but granted, it probably doesn't even matter, because Pathetic's also kind of the same as weak, but you get what I mean, right? I'm gonna use Mephiles here as a comparison, as both have a connection to Shadow and deems them as their enemy. Funnily enough, Shadow didn't recognize either one before being provided extra context when they first meet him. Mephiles and Shadow's dynamic worked because Shadow's the one who imprisoned him after Solaris split apart, creating his hatred for Shadow and vows to kill him. He even gloats about the irony of being awakened through Shadow's literal shadow, the shadow of his captor. Even afterwards, Mephiles interacts with Shadow more and tries to win him over to his side by showing him the future and how he's treated there. Infinite kinda does that with the Shadow clone, but it doesn't really... Wait, how's that the same thing? Funnily enough, the Japanese version does this whole scene so much more justice. As it states, his squad was killed, and losing the Shadow meant he was too weak to avenge his comrades. He doesn't even say he's weak until after processing what Shadow says to him. Also, it just has a better voice performance than the English version. No shade to Liam O'Brien, of course, but I much prefer the Japanese version. Like, holy sh**, that scream. With that tangent aside, it's time to move on to the last level. We return to present time where Infinite blames Shadow for the fact he's mid. Infinite then casts a Phantom Ruby hallucination on him, creating the final level for the DLC. This is actually the best and most challenging level in the game. We enter Green Hill where a bunch of Phantom Ruby cube stuff keep homing in on you. This creates the challenge of you having to stay on your toes, and they do create some interesting platforming segments around them. Granted, I had a skill issue in this footage, but it's still challenging. We also get a remix of the BioLizard theme from Sonic Adventure 2. Writing this, I realize how well these remixes fit the levels. Westopolis plays in enemy territory because you are traversing through a town in the midst of an attack. Rhythm and balance made sense because you were in a jungle, and the song was previously used for White Jungle, another jungle level. Lastly, supporting me makes sense because you are an illusion created by Infinite. Throw It All Away from SA2 is also very prominent in this DLC as well, mainly being the main menu theme. One more thing I'd like to note is this segment. It's unironically pretty unsettling.
Sure seems that way. Probably because it never really happened.
What? Affirmative. I have never known to be defeated. Omega? I am not defeated. I am not weak. I am not weak. I am not weak. I am not weak. I am not weak.
Once you beat the level, Infinite gloats about his amazing power and even claims not even Sonic can stop him. Connection returns to Rouge and contacts them to get out of the base. We time skip to a month later where they get intel on an attack from Eggman. However, something goes wrong and Rouge urges Shadow to hurry. Then the events of the game unfold, finally coming full circle. That's the DLC. When you complete it, you must at least complete a modern Sonic level to unlock him, and he's available in levels that are exclusive to modern Sonic. It's nice to have, I guess, but now it's time to wrap it up. To conclude, this DLC is only slightly better than the base game. Shadow can almost be considered a cosmetic change because he plays absolutely identical to Sonic. The first level's okay with only half the level being interesting. The second level's too short and utilizes the water slide gimmick too much. Also, Infinite's origin being completely ridiculous in the worst way possible. Finally, the third level is the best as it provides a fun platforming challenge. Besides the great, suitable remixes, there's nothing else special about this. Now, Shadow Generations is the first mainline game to feature Shadow as a playable character since then. As of writing this, I don't have the game yet, but it already looks like it plays better. It has more creative reimagined levels, and what? An interesting gimmick to separate himself from Sonic? It even has an amazing reimagining of Sunset Heights where you can actually traverse the set being destroyed by Death Egg robots. Also, it has Mephiles. Come on, that's an automatic W. However, it is time to get out of here. I'll likely be playing Sonic X Shadow Generations after this video releases. So see y'all!